The review which you are about to see is an account of one YouTuber discussing one of the most riveting and influential horror films of all time. It is all the more tragic that he is just now getting to this franchise, but even if he lived a very, very long life, he could not have expected his time in Elm Street to be such a workload. For him, an idyllic analyzation and exploration of his second horror franchise became a nightmare. The events of that collection of reviews were to lead to some of the most mad and macabre content in YouTube history. Cody Leach's Texas Chainsaw Massacre review series. Welcome to my Texas Chainsaw Massacre review series. Leading up to the release of Leatherface this October, I'm going to review all of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies alongside my Child's Play reviews leading up to the release of Cult of Chucky. So check all of those out, guys. Strap in. Let's get going. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre tells the story of a group of teenagers on the way to a relative's homestead who are preyed upon by a family of cannibals. So the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974 is one of the most unique, influential, and strangest movies to ever be released in horror movie history. Just the nature of this original movie itself, it's always strange to me. Even 7 movies later, it still puzzles me how this original movie spawned a franchise, because it really feels like something that was meant to exist on its own. It doesn't feel like a Friday the 13th or a Nightmare on Elm Street or even a Child's Play, where it's meant to produce sequels, to carry on characters, to create icons, to create a franchise. This feels like a movie that's out to make a statement, and that is it. The movie was even marketed as being a true story, like this was actually found footage, back before found footage was even a thing, of these kids being murdered by this family of cannibals. And you'll notice a lot of similarities with not only the way that the movie is filmed, but the way that the story and the way that a lot of the shots and everything are taken in this original Texas Chainsaw Massacre with films like The Blair Witch Project, with films like Paranormal Activity. This has a lot in common with those first outings of franchises like that has this shine, and it has kind of this facade of a true story. Like you are watching a snuff film and it's just marketed as a horror movie. And all of that I'm going to attribute to Tobe Hooper and the way that he executed the filming of this first movie, because it is so gritty, so grainy, and so realistic and raw, the way that he shot everything from the first opening frame of that body on top of that cross all the way until the final frame of Leatherface swinging around his chainsaw and it's suddenly cut off. Everything about this movie feels way too real for comfort. And it's also because of that the movie's actually kind of hard to review for me. I'm probably not going to stick with my traditional format where I give pros and I give cons. I'm just going to talk about how I feel, how this movie makes me feel, whatever kind of reaction it gets out of me, because this movie is so realistic. The whole thing is just bathed in this potential reality where you watch it and you feel like somewhere in the surroundings near you, this could have happened and probably did happen, and you're somehow watching a videotape of how it happened. And one of the most interesting things to me too, as much as I'm talking about how gritty and grimy and realistic and shocking and appalling this movie is, it's known as being one of the goriest movies of all time. And that's how I walked into this movie when I first watched it when I was 14 years old, expecting the goriest splatterfest I've ever seen. But this movie is damn near a bloodless film. That right there tells you how incredible the execution was in filming this for what they were trying to go for. The fact that you can have one of the most shocking, appalling, and goriest movies of horror movie history, and there's barely any blood in it. That's amazing. And going along with that, one of the things that I really noticed the last time that I rewatched this movie a few days ago was that even though all these things the movie really puts in front of your face and it shows you completely as far as like the torture chambers and the hooks and all the brutality that these kids endure, and you get scenes like with the woods whenever he's cutting up the kid in the chainsaw and you feel like you're right there with him.
Sally, I hear something. Stop. Stop.
For from the way that they portray the characters, from Leatherface to the hitchhiker, and you just feel like you are in this setting with these victims. The thing that's most shocking and appalling in this movie is the things that they choose not to see, the things that they suggest, the things that they put into your mind that you are automatically trying to uncover whatever you have not already seen in this movie, and you're trying to come up with your own version of what is happening, your own version of what it looks like when a kid is getting cut up on a table with his girlfriend behind him hung on a hook. All of those things that it makes your mind work is the worst and most shocking shit that you're going to see in this runtime, is the stuff that you come up with yourself. And that's not easy for a movie to do, people. It's not easy for a movie to get that kind of reaction out of me. Whenever you were watching it, and even though you were seeing things that are shocking and appalling and just riveting on screen, the things that the movie forces you to come up with in your own mind are even worse. That is insane. To be honest, I've always found the remake a little bit more terrifying in the traditional slasher horror movie sense, but as far as a shocking telling of murder and brutality, no other movie in the franchise comes close to what this original movie accomplishes on that side of horrific. It's one of those movies that, to me, it's less of a story and more of an experience, to the point of it being extremely off-putting for a lot of people the first time that they watch this movie. This is very, very rarely going to be a movie that even horror fans are going to experience for the first time and go, yes, I love that movie. Top 10. It's a movie that people are going to have to experience multiple times, and they're going to experience it at different points of their lives, and they're going to grab and latch onto different aspects and what is most horrifying, what is most shocking about this story. And again, there's not many horror movies that will do that. It's not many horror movies that will evolve with your experience as you get older. The more times you experience the story, the more deeper you get into the horrific nature of it, the more things that you latch onto that bother you, that sit well with you, that don't sit well with you. It's a really wild experience of a horror movie. But diving into the more traditional review sense for a few minutes, let's talk about some of the characters and performances in this movie. Leatherface in this original movie was brought to us by Gunnar Hansen, and he actually studied developmentally challenged kids to prepare for this role. And you really see it in the few scenes whenever they really dive into who Leatherface is as a person. He's not just like this wild beast, this hungry dog that's out to murder everybody. He's this developmentally, mentally challenged person who's basically a pawn of this sick and twisted cannibalistic family. They use him as the muscle so they can eat. And that's another aspect that's not very common in horror movies. You don't often get the lead iconic killer who changes throughout the movie as far as how you view them. Usually, you get the killer, and throughout the runtime, till the end, they're the killer. They're the evil. They are the beast that needs to be vanquished. But in Leatherface, he's this misunderstood person who you never really sympathize with him, but you get to see him go from the monster to the puppet on the strings of the true monsters.
Where are the kids? Where are they? Show me! Let them get away? Are you sure?
And that aspect of the Sawyer family as a collective monster is something that they really explore a lot in the sequels to its fullest potential. And the other performance I want to talk about is Marilyn Burns, who plays the lead character of Sally. Now, this character is really interesting because throughout most of the movie, she's your typical 70s teenager. But throughout the third act especially, you really see this character descend into lunacy and madness. And the interesting part about that too, about the third act and how her descent into madness is portrayed, something that I've learned along the way in researching this movie, and something that I was actually told from Drum Dum's reviews, little plug for you, Lee, is that in the third act they were shooting so much and reshooting that the actress herself was actually starting to descend into lunacy because of her being overworked and her being kind of dehydrated and her being sick of doing scenes over and over and over again. So by the time you get to the final scene, when she's driving off in the back of that car and she's laughing all maniacally, that's actually the actress just laughing at, holy shit, this fucking shoot is done, thank God. A little behind the scenes like that always adds to a movie for me. It's always really interesting to find out that not only was that the direction they wanted to take that character, but by the time they got the performance they wanted to portray that, the actress wasn't acting anymore. That was reality. There's so many iconic scenes in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre that just sticks in your head. From the very first time we see Leatherface come through that door, to the hook scene, which is most people's most shocking scene in this movie. All the way to the famous dinner scene when the Sawyer family, including Grandpa, the fucking Grandpa who will never die in this goddamn franchise, comes in to feast upon probably the parts of the people that she came to this house with. And you just slowly see this scene, the characters, and Sally especially just descend into this grimy madness in this one scene alone. As far as any cons for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, honestly, the only con that I have for this movie, which is just because of the nature of the film itself, because it is so brutal, because it is so vicious and raw and grainy and gritty, and so in your face with this potential reality that is bathed in the entire runtime, the rewatchability isn't completely there for me. I do revisit this movie a decent amount of times, as far as like maybe once every 2 or 3 years, but it's not a movie where I'm like, you know, I'm in the mood for a slasher movie. Let's throw in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's not really a movie that I'm going to recommend to people who aren't horror fans. Like, you gotta see Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's a movie that is there for the experience, but it's not an experience I want to have a ton of times. But while some will call that a con, some will call that the biggest pro of this movie, because that's exactly what they wanted to go for, was that kind of experience that you don't want to relive over and over and over again. But nonetheless, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre gave birth to one of horror's greatest icons. It gave birth to a great franchise for the most part. We'll get into that. And it also was one of the most influential and shocking movies of that era. So if you're interested in seeing where this all started, if you want to put away the typical horror movies, the typical slashers, and experience something very, very different, I can't recommend anything more than the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So definitely, if you're a horror fan, go out and buy it. So what do you guys think of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Is this movie hard to get through for you? Is this a movie that you constantly want to rewatch? Or is it like me, where it's an experience all on its own, and it's so bathed in potential reality and darkness and sickness that it's something that you do want to experience occasionally, but not all the time? Put all of your thoughts on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. As we get into the rest of this series, we're going to have a lot of fun talking about this franchise. Put all your thoughts down below on the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. If you want to check out some of my social media links like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, those are down below, as well as my Patreon page, where I have a lot of exclusive content for patron eyes only. It's a great way to support the channel and a great way to get exclusive content for your eyes only and have influence into what everybody sees as far as a patron sponsored review. Check all that out, and if you want to check out some more of my videos, including the rest of this Texas Chainsaw Massacre review series, you can check it out by clicking right over here.